Hey, homebrewers! Ever stare at a bag of specialty coffee and wonder, how exactly those little beans made it all the way from the farm to your grinder? Well, today we're cracking wide open the secret behind that beautifully crisp, clean cup of what we call washed coffee.
You've definitely seen that word stamped on your favorite bag of beans, right? But what does it actually mean? Well, we're going to dive into the fascinating and honestly kind of wild mechanical and chemical journey that gets the seed out of that sticky fruit. By the end of this explainer, you're going to know exactly what it takes to produce that bright, clean flavor profile we all love in our morning brew.
So here is our high-level roadmap. We've got 4 distinct stages to cover today. 1. Sorting by floating. 2. Depulping or squeezing. 3. Fermentation, which is basically a microbe wash. And 4. Drying, the final sunbath.
All right, let's jump straight into step 1, sorting, where it's literally sink or swim.
First up, we hit the water channels. This is the initial sorting phase to separate the good stuff from the bad. And it's just a beautifully simple first step. Once the cherries are collected, they're dropped right into a bath of flowing water. Now, the dense, perfectly ripe cherries, they sink straight to the bottom. Meanwhile, the unripe or just straight-up bad coffee floats to the top, where it can easily be skimmed off and tossed out. So yeah, a literal sink-or-swim test for quality.
Moving right along to step 2, depulping or squeezing the seed.
Okay, so once we've got our premium sinkers, those ripe cherries are fed into a depulping machine. Picture this. It presses the fruit in water through a screen. This strips away the outer skin and a bunch of the pulp. But here's the catch. The seed pops out still completely covered in this stubborn, sticky layer. We call this mucilage. It's basically a hefty amount of gooey pulp clinging for dear life to the bean, and it absolutely must be broken down before we can even think about drying the coffee.
Which brings us to step 3, fermentation, the microbe wash.
So to get rid of that sticky mucilage, the beans are flushed along water channels right into these massive tanks. And guys, this is where the magic happens. In this ferment and wash method, microbes actually go to town, eating away and breaking down the cellulose in that sticky pulp. It's wild. This process, well, it can take anywhere from 8 to 50 hours, though for most coffees, it usually sits around that 24 to 36-hour mark. The exact time really just depends on local temperatures, how thick that mucilage layer is, and the concentration of enzymes doing the work.
Now here's the kicker. This stage is absolutely crucial, and it has to be watched like a hawk. Processors are walking a serious tightrope here, because actually, if they let the beans over-ferment even a little bit, your coffee is going to pick up these really undesirable, funky, sour flavors that's completely ruin your final brew. Nobody wants that.
So how do they know when it's perfectly done? Honestly, it's often assessed purely by feel. Processors will literally reach right down into the tanks, feeling for the parchment surrounding the bean to shift from a slimy, slippery texture to a much rougher, pebbly feel. Once it feels like wet pebbles, boom, fermentation is complete.
But wait, let's look at a pretty fascinating alternative. Some countries that are really short on water, places like Colombia, Bolivia, and Costa Rica, they'll actually skip those water immersion tanks entirely. Instead, they use mechanical scrubbers to rip off the mucilage. This is a real game changer because these machines use only a tiny fraction, like 1/40th, of the water compared to traditional tanks. That massively reduces the contamination of local water sources, which is a huge win for the environment.
Finally, we hit step 4, drying, the final sunbath.
All right, so whether that mucilage was eaten by microbes in a tank or scrubbed off mechanically, the coffee is first thoroughly washed with pristine water. At this point, the bean is totally exposed, protected only by 2 tiny layers, a silver skin and a parchment layer. The beans are then spread out on huge concrete patios or maybe on raised beds in the sun, and they'll hang out there for several days. Sometimes mechanical dryers are used, or even a mix of both. The ultimate goal here, getting those seeds dried down to a very specific, strict 10 to 12% moisture content. Once they hit that sweet spot, it's officially called parchment coffee, ready to be bagged up and shipped off to the dry mill.
And there you have it, the whole shebang. The seed has been successfully extracted, cleaned, and perfectly prepped. Now that you've mastered the science behind the wash process, I really hope it brings a whole new level of appreciation to your daily homebrew. Seriously, think about all those floating tests, the crazy microbe action, and the days spent sun-drying the very next time you take a sip. So knowing everything it went through, what new, clean, crisp details are you going to taste in your next cup? Happy brewing, everyone, and keep exploring.